It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Kate Alexander. She's going to hate me if she doesn't already.
Thank you, Simone. I start by acknowledging this beautiful land we meet on today was not settled on peacefully by my white ancestors. It was taken with great force, and Aboriginal people fought for their land in battles of unwinnable odds, and they've fought for their children every day since. And may I start by upholding the wisdom, the resistance, the resilience and the courage of Aboriginal people, and placing on the record my deep gratitude to Aboriginal people who choose to work in child protection and out-of-home care across Australia for what they give, for what they do and for what it takes. Good morning, everyone. I looked around this room and I thought, bloody hell, there's a lot of experience and wisdom in this room, and I don't want to feel like I'm teaching you all to suck eggs. Simone asked me to speak about leading reviews, and Simone was my boss for a very long time, so when she asked me to do something, I just do it. Right? So here we are. How to talk about leading reviews in 15 minutes. You could do this in 2 days. That's the plan. We're doing that, aren't we, Tabitha? At Life Without Barriers. But I'll give you a 15-minute snapshot and you can ask some questions. Why? I don't know. That's a new thing, the way those words come like that. They're meant to be there from the beginning. Why am I talking about this? I'm still learning a lot about reviews, but I do have a lot of experience in leading reviews. For 20 years in statutory child protection at DCJ, I was responsible for the child death review function. It followed me when I changed jobs. And I've also done reviews for other states, for South Australia, the ACT, been involved in a big review at Life Without Barriers at the moment, and done some joint reviews with the sector on critical incidents. So I'm really talking about child death and critical incident reviews at the moment. A couple of quick examples of reviews that left an impact that wasn't good. In 2007, a baby died in England called Baby Peter. Baby P, household name in England. You probably know about it here. And what happened is that 4 caseworkers lost their jobs on air. The minister at the time, he was called Minister Ball, so I've sort of stuck with me that. And on the radio, he announced that people would be losing their jobs, and that's how the caseworkers found out about it. And it was all over the media, everywhere. I did a Churchill Fellowship not long afterwards, and a taxi driver talked to me about Baby Peter. It was everywhere. And in the 6 months that followed his death, the removal rate of children across England went up by 50%. And that was as a result of the way that death was managed, and children deserve way more and much better than such a system. So if that's such a fragile system, that decisions about whether children come into care or not could reflect the anxiety that was in the system at the time. In 2012, a little girl died in South Australia, Chloe Valentine, a household name over there, and a lot of us will remember because it was captured a lot of media at the time. And an internal child death review was written, and it was ended up at inquest, and there was a lot of focus on that inquest and a lot of coverage by the media and a lot of loud voices from academia, legal services, etc. It wasn't a loud voice from the statutory system. However, statutory child protection workers found out what their own department thought about their practice at inquest. They hadn't seen the review that had been written about their practice, but it certainly came out in evidence and it certainly came out in the media. And another example in Sydney was the first child death review I ever led, more than 20 years ago now. It was about a little girl, 4-year-old girl, who died because she'd ingested her mother's methadone. And the story her mother gave is that she'd left some methadone in the bottom of a cup and the little girl drank it and went into cardiac arrest. And that was the first review I ever did, and I learned a great deal about what not to do, and that story will always stick with me because some good recommendations came out of that story, but I was so enthusiastic and keen to get to the bottom of that story and how could have this has happened, but I didn't really take care of the workforce at the time, and I've learned a whole lot about how to lead reviews since then. So the value of a good review, what I would say is there's 3 best ways to think about the value of a good review, and I've seen outstanding reviews that have made a difference, and I've seen awful reviews that have done a lot of harm. And there's 3 really key stakeholders when you're thinking about the value of a good review. And three ways to really judge that. The first is, did it honour the child and the family we're writing about? Now, I'm talking about reviews that aren't written specifically to be given to families. That's not what these critical incident child death reviews are about. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't meet with families to tell them what the review said. And a good review should honour that child, and it should describe the child, and it should honour the family and their life and their struggles and their strengths. And I think about one inquest in particular. I've given evidence in a lot of inquests, and one in particular was in Deniliquin. And the only person who turned up every single day who wasn't paid to be in that courtroom was this little boy's grandmother. And she sat up the back of the inquest, and it really mattered that the story we told and our review that was in evidence, it really mattered that she and her family and that little boy were honoured by that. So a good review should honour children and their families. A good review should honour the caseworker, and it's really important that the person who worked with the child the most, the team around that child, that their voice is a part of a review. That doesn't mean that we can't say if we have differences of opinion about some of the practice, or if we need to say some of the practice wasn't effective, but they need to contribute to that, and I can give you a little more about that. And the last thing is, the test of a good review is, how does it stand up in an inquest? How does it stand up in a Royal Commission? There's nothing like the experience of preparing to give evidence the night before an inquest and thinking, bloody hell, why did we write this? And you might have signed off a review 3 years earlier, Rachel's nodding. We had a lot of conversations about how to keep our reports protected in inquests, because it's not useful when they get in the media. And But you might have signed off a review 3 years ago, and then suddenly the night before an inquest you read it with really different eyes, because you're going to be in the witness box, and it really matters. So it's always thinking about what gets written, and did it tell an honest story? Did it tell an open story? So a couple of things about a good review. A good review provides context. Eileen Munro's done some beautiful work about this, and she talks about a systems approach. It's the whole story. And the first basic thing is, why is the review happening? Is it just to find out what happened? Is it to make useful recommendations? Why? So that comes down to a good terms of reference. And terms of reference matter because if it's a story about a child who's been known to the system maybe 20 years, maybe their family, massive volumes of reports, where do you want to narrow it? So it provides context. It educates. A good review educates the readers, and there's a useful opportunity around that to regulators, externals. A good review elevates the voices of those most in the know. So ideally, people who knew the children should be interviewed as a part of a review process. And the timing of that really matters. And what I'm talking about here is there's two things that need to happen after something critical incident child death is this response to staff, a staff support response, which is someone get in there quickly and support staff. I've known of stories that files have been doctored after children have died. Additions to work have been changed. It's really important to protect staff from the tendency for those sorts of behaviours, which means get in early and, if necessary, messages about it's time to put the pens down and we'll take those files. And it's not about not trusting, it's really about protecting people. So that's a support function, and a review function should step in later. It's too early in those first days to be looking at reviews. But that matters because, particularly in government, you can be in a situation where you're trying to lead a supportive staff response, systemic response, and you have a minister or a secretary who wants answers right now. And they want to know, how did this happen? What happened? They've looked in the system themselves and they've got particular questions. And sometimes they've gone direct to local staff and the review function's over here. Try whatever you can do, try not to let that happen, because what happens is caseworkers or managers will answer questions in a certain way in those early days, and then they'll need to stick to those answers. I'm not talking about dishonesty, but I'm talking about a simple story might get told, or a linear story gets told that's not the whole story you want. A good review tells the whole context. So anything you can do to buy trust in senior people, which is let us do this, let us run this review process properly, let us get staff. We worked for many, many years with staff who participated openly without union or legal people present. They did work openly with the review process because we worked really hard to give them a voice. So that's just what matters. And makes recommendations only when they need to be made. I can't stress this enough. So many reviews It's very tempting, and inquests do this all the time. Coroners are always keen for new recommendations, and it's really that opportunity to step back. The best thing we did in DCJ was stop making recommendations about individual children, but putting them to a panel and bringing senior people to a panel and saying, do we need a recommendation, or is this already something that's addressed in the current reform? So that's something that matters. Oh, nice quote, just about the importance of really understanding the impact of anxiety, perhaps. And I think about a woman who came to work for the department many years ago, and she, senior public servant, hadn't worked directly in child protection before, and she came in, she was running a district, and one of the things she wanted to do was understand the work, so she said, I'll come out on a visit. And she went out on a visit to a mother with a tiny baby, and this woman had a fairly serious addiction, and it was pretty touch and go, the decision to let the baby go home with the mother. So she went on the visit, very supportive, very interested, all those things. A few weeks later, she told me she was in a meeting and she got a text saying, we've had a child death in the district, a baby's died. And she said that she told me she had this instant response where she thought she was going to throw up, and she thought, please don't let it be that baby, please don't let it be the baby I saw. Now, I really respected her for her honesty in her response, but what she was showing was a little insight of what it's like for caseworkers every single day. And for her, that feeling of we were the last people there, I supported the decision to leave that baby in that house. It was the right decision, as much as anyone could know. But her response was, what if it's that one? I remember talking about it to a senior person at the time, and she said to me, yeah, I don't really understand why people get so worried about being blamed in child protection, because by and large we don't blame individual caseworkers. A good review shouldn't even name caseworkers. Why are people so worried about that? And I think about that woman as the answer for that. She wasn't worried because she thought she was going to be blamed. She wasn't worried about that. She was worried about carrying the feeling of, did I miss something? Or carrying the feeling about, could I have done something different to prevent that child's death? So what often gets talked about as defensive, I've often heard child protection workforce being described as defensive in review approaches. It's not my experience. Not my experience. It's not about defensiveness, it's about the feeling of imagine that sense of responsibility that I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my life. On the subject of potential defensiveness in the workforce, though, I would really emphasise that gentle steps are the best steps, and workforce can come across as defensive if they feel they need to protect themselves. So certain questioning styles, particularly ones over the phone about why did you do this, why did you do that, why was that referral made, why wasn't that visit, all the time we are creating anxiety in the workforce. And however skilled and compassionate and open your reviewer is, some damage has been done by those questions that have already been asked. And what I mean about a gentle approach is let caseworkers tell you what they want to tell you, what their experience of working with the family was. Ask them what recommendations they would like to see made as a result of the review and what things they think would help. I've had the experience so many times and been blown away by it, where you sit in front of caseworkers as they read a report. And some of our very confidential ones, we would take them out and we'd sit with people. And I'd be watching them read it and I'd think, oh, you're up to this page. I know this is going to be a hard page to read, or you're up to this page. And over I've been blown away by caseworkers' ability to say, yeah, I think that's fair. I think what you said is fair. Sometimes, though, they want to tell you something they don't like, and it really matters. It really matters to take reports as a draft. And many years ago, I remember a particular minister, not you, a particular minister who was saying to me, where's that review? I want the review. And I said to him, I'm going out tomorrow to sit with caseworkers to read it, and then you can have it. And he's saying, what do you mean caseworkers get to see the review before me? That's not okay. This is a child in care. I understood from his perspective, a child in his parental responsibility of the state died. He felt he had a right to see the review first. But what I was trying to say is trust us, because going to caseworkers first and letting them give me feedback first and make changes where I can protects our review function long term, and it actually protects baby Peter example. It protects all other children long term in terms of doing that well. Sometimes it's as simple as someone will say, I just don't like this sentence. And I remember one review that one of our staff had written that the documentation had been very sloppy, and it had. And this worker said, I just hate that sentence. And I said to her, what do you want us to write? And she said, you can say that the documentation was very poor. Great. Let her have a choice. Certain words, certain ways of saying things. And I've had caseworkers have said, look, I actually think you were too gentle. I think you could have gone harder about what we didn't do for this family. So if people have that chance to contribute to recommendations, there are times where you can agree to disagree and say, look, we are going to leave that bit in there, but I've heard you and I've heard what you didn't like about it. The importance of writing about how people respond, the bit where you say, it's got to be genuine, but where you actually add into a review how open people were, how willing they were to learn, it really matters. I've never come across a caseworker or a manager in response to a review or a family whose child was at the centre of the review who weren't motivated by make sure something useful comes out of this, make sure something good comes out of this, and anything you can do to honour that in the way you write really matters. So I'll just finish up with, I feel I owe it to Eileen Munro because she's so, her work about systemic errors in reasoning and critical reviews is essential. And she talks about reviews and quality assurance as the brick-like components of a good system, the necessary components, but not sufficient. And she said the hard work lies in the soft stuff, the mortar that holds those tangible elements together. The soft stuff resides in the skill of professionals. And that is really the point I'm just trying to push, which is slow it down, spend the time with the people who knew the family the most, let them talk about it and let them see what you wrote about them before it goes anywhere else. Thanks.